A 4-column chart is a cover page for a math portfolio for each unit, chapter, or lesson taught. Like the name, it consists of at least 4 columns. From left to right, the 4 columns are concept or skill, concept understood, concept mastered, and examples. The purpose of this tool is to track personal progress of learning and to differentiate between understanding and mastery of each individual concept. This strategy should be updated regularly in order to be the most beneficial for a student. The first column is the widest, the middle 2 are very skinny, and the last column is of medium width.
For example, this student made their 4-column chart very neat, very organized, and they updated it regularly. For their example column, they used specific problems for every concept.
Another student was extremely specific, listing concept and skills. And instead of using specific problems, they referenced page numbers for examples.
Another way to use 4-column chart is to add extra columns to fit individual students' learning style. For example, this student had a column for lesson number and to check if they had put it in their portfolio or not. They also use color coordination in order to accentuate gaps in the understanding and mastery columns.
Students may use this strategy for benefits such as keeping an index for their portfolio, staying organized, tracking their progress, being aware if they're falling behind, and as a study tool for tests. For a successful portfolio, the basic guidelines should be followed, explaining how to solve a problem and justifying each step in the process, including enough examples for each concept from a range of easy problems to show big ideas to very difficult problems to ensure complete mastery, with personal commentary on content as well as other connections, analogies, comparisons, or emotional cognitive quirks that are useful to be aware of. This student's portfolio has 2 columns. The work is on the left side and the commentary is on the right side. This student connects the commentary to specific parts of the work with letters, like footnotes. Also, they inserted squares of graph paper for neatness and many examples, each for their own specification. This student used unlined paper, which made it more spatially appealing. They also added artistic touches to fit their learning style.
Another example is of a student who highlighted theirs, color-coding it for lesson numbers, section headers, the difficulty level of the concept, problem answers, and commentary. Their commentary was mixed in with their work and was connected by arrows.
In closing, a math portfolio is completely personal. It should include comments, thoughts, explanations of common mistakes, and connections that help the process of understanding the concept to a deep level, then mastery. This means that not one student's portfolio will be the same as another student's because students learn and think differently. Portfolios are ideally beneficial when they are regularly updated throughout the lesson and not done right before the test. For maximum benefits from portfolios, a student must have the mentality that they're making the portfolio only for themselves, for the intrinsic reward, and knowing it'll pay off substantially in the long run. When wanting to refresh or even relearn concepts, referring back to portfolios made years ago that were easy to follow, had clear explanations and personal notes, it saves massive amounts of time and effort versus trying to use a textbook. Thorough portfolios that can be used in the present and later in the future help ensure mastery to the deepest level.
Reflecting is a learning strategy designed to help students reach the deepest level of understanding by allowing the students to include their own explanations, emotional reactions, experiences, and thoughts in a written or typed document that could be shared with other students to benefit both the reflector and their classmates. A student should reflect after a new lesson, homework, quiz, or test to benefit and learn from it, not for the sake of simply doing it for a grade or to make the teacher happy. A student may only reflect on the lesson taught in class by explaining the concept in their own words or going through another example problem. However, the most beneficial reflections have aspects of both factual content and personal comments. After explaining the lesson, other things a student might decide to include could be what they understood or what made sense to them, what they found difficult to understand and why, how they felt about the lesson, what to do to be successful, or any questions that they had. Students can also post their reflections on the math blog, designed specifically for that math class. The blog will be a very important resource for those who may have questions, need clarification, or need a different perspective on a concept. Students are able to comment on other reflections made by their classmates by sharing their personal thoughts and experiences to help others out or give encouraging advice.
Students can reflect on the concepts learned in class by explaining the lessons in their own words. These students structured their reflections in note-taking style. Students can use specific examples from the notes that they took on the lesson, from their skill practice or homework, or they can even make one up. They included the directions and explained each step by using bulleted numbers and clearly writing out each step of the process. After the lesson taught in class, this student needed clarification on the content of the lesson. Shortly after, another student who understood the lesson answered the student's question to the best of their ability. Not only does the math blog create the opportunity for students to ask questions at home, but also allows them to get feedback in another student's perspective, which may be more beneficial than the teacher's way of explaining it. Although the student was still a little confused, the teacher and the student intern also commented on the student's reflection to help clear up any more confusion.
Reflecting is not just a tool to review the lesson that day, but is a technique that can be applied to every aspect of learning. This student wrote this reflection after receiving a test score lower than they were expecting. They still wanted to get better, however, and reflected on their test in order to pinpoint their mistakes and articulate how to prevent them in the future. They even wrote a list of goals, or new unit resolutions, that they were going to work towards in hopes of becoming more successful in the next unit. Most students are unaware of their emotional reactions to the learning process. So for this reason, it is even more beneficial for a student to reflect on that. By knowing that a particular lesson has been frustrating to them, a student can shift their focus to instead being determined to understand it. Otherwise, they might get stuck and not realize why they don't feel good, or even see that they aren't feeling good in the first place, which could be inhibiting their learning. This particular student was able to connect their struggle with math to other classes that were difficult for them, and even went so far to identify their learning style and why particular classes came easier to them than others. They were able to recognize that math was not natural to them, but in doing so, they knew they would have to shift their thinking and perhaps work harder than others in order to be successful. Students can also reflect on the culture of the class. It is best if the teacher already takes it upon themselves to promote an environment that encourages the students to take ownership of the class's learning. Most classes in school are not like that, and the focus is on the individual students doing whatever they can to make themselves successful. But in a culture in which the students in the class decide to work as a team, the ones who understand the material well and have it mastered can help those who do not understand it. Likewise, the students who are struggling will feel comfortable asking their classmates for help. This way, the maximum amount of learning can happen, and students get the opportunity of teaching their peers or accepting help and becoming successful. This student reflected on a particular day when the teacher was absent and the class was being led by a student intern and a substitute teacher. They were given a workday to get any last question answered and have time to finish their portfolios before the unit test the next day. By reflecting and sharing personal thoughts, a student is showing to the class that they're willing to contribute to others' learnings as well as their own, that they're willing to ask questions even though it's uncomfortable, and that they want to learn as a team. Like portfolios, reflections are great tools to use before tests and quizzes. They will include explanations in their own words, emphasize key points in what they were thinking at the time, will help them avoid past mistakes, and pay attention to close details. As students write more and more reflections, they will be able to make deeper connections and explain topics to their furthest degrees, thus boosting their confidence. Also, after repetition, they will notice that they will learn concepts faster by reflecting and spend less time struggling, even though in the beginning reflecting seems to be taking up more time.